Okay, so where we are now is what most people would consider probably blocking of our first shot. So let's watch it just so you can see. So I'm going to sort of limit this to where I want shot one to end, which I think is around frame 80. I can always change this later if I want to, but you'll see currently my timeline is showing about 200 frames. I can pull this back, sort of cap that out at about 80. Right now I'm at 81, so I need to move that one frame closer. And so now shot one is going to be frames 1 through 80. And if I click this little loop button here, I can watch that play over and over again. And so I may end up extending it just a smidge. Let's do like 80, 82. And that way we get just a frame or two of Winslow landing before we cut to the next shot. And so we'll talk about the next shot separately here, but I want to dive deeper into what we have here in this shot and how we can continue to refine this. So if you think in traditional animation terms, right, what we would have is the keyframe animator who would do the key drawings, and that's what we kind of have here now. We have our alien character looking down and then looking up, and then the anticipation down, the up stretch, like the first pose of like the up stretch. I want to stretch that out a little bit longer, so this is the range of time while the character is up here sort of vibrating, right? And then I want the character to come back down to here, and then I probably want one more keyframe here just to sort of pin that down, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit F6 to get my keyframe there, but I also want to just change it just a little bit so it's not exactly the same frame. And the reason for doing that is what we would call moving hold. So we want the character to be mostly staying in the same pose, right? But we don't want it to feel like we just paused the animation, right? And so now if we got just this little bit of like settle here, right, then that'll give us a little bit of time to like sort of live in that pose without feeling completely paused. So F6. Now, this is a really good exercise for thinking about what animation is, right? We have these key poses. So in this range of 82 frames, I've defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drawings, right? Which means there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 other drawings that are incomplete, right? And right now we can't see those. Right. If we were doing this in traditional animation, though, I would you'd be handing off 7 drawings to someone and asking them to fill in these gaps in between. And, for filling in the gap between, say, frame 51 and 54, that might not be that big of a challenge, right? There's just really 2 drawings they have to figure out there. However, for figuring out what happens in between frames 1 and 35, like that's 33 drawings where I don't have any information about how I want this to change, right? And so again, in traditional animation, the keyframe animator would hand this off to the in-betweener with some instructions. But I don't think that they would hand it off at this point. I think they would want to give them some more indicating drawings, right? And so in animation on the computer, particularly in 3D, but we can also use these terms in 2D, we would call these additional drawings that we use to kind of refine this motion, we would call those breakdowns, right? So essentially think of it as I have this time range of motion, and I'm just going to break this down into smaller and smaller chunks where I'm defining what's happening to make it clearer how I want that motion to transition. Eventually, the program will be able to fill in the gaps. The program will be our in-betweener. But right now, it just doesn't have enough information. And so if I were to go in here and select all of these and set this to tween keys, and we watch it, this is a very boring animation that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So now we can keep it this way. The reason I like to work in these stop motion keyframes, though, is because it lets me see the thing that I have actually done. If I look at this, I know that I have done this frame and this frame, right? And it's very I can then make changes to those frames to make them better, right? But I haven't done anything to frame 20. And if I am sort of analyzing what is happening here, this looks bad. And what it can cause me to do is to focus on the wrong things, right? Because really, I'm like, oh, the eye isn't doing the right thing. I should go in there and fix the eye. And that's not actually the way to do this. The right way to do this is to come up with an entirely new drawing that guides us through that motion. So if I were to divide this and figure out a completely new drawing for frame 20, well, if I have this in stop motion keyframes, I don't get anything for free here, and I have to define it myself. Just like if I were drawing this, I would have to draw it myself. So I have a tendency to want to work in this and figure out my poses kind of organically that way. And I can step through my drawings this way, and I can also go from keyframe to keyframe here, and you'll see that if I look at the little shortcut keys that are listed there, it is the semicolon and the comma key. So if I'm here, I can use semicolon and comma to step back and forth between these two to see if I like them. And then I could go to say here and say, you know what, I want to hold this animation for a little longer. I want this to sort of stay similar to this, sort of how I did the moving hold here, maybe till about here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F6 here to key everything on it. Again, it tried to make it a motion, or a motion keyframe. I'm going to set that back to a stop motion, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of pose this to have my character becoming more and more intrigued with this. Right? Maybe have him like, what is that? And using my iris peg here to look even closer. I may even do a little bit of a squint on this corner here. Right. And so now I can use that comma and semicolon key to step between those two and see that that's the transition I'm going to get, right? And is that giving me what I want? Right? And I may be able to just adjust that a little bit. Let me push this down. I definitely probably want to do something with these things. And so now, again, comma, semicolon, and I can see comma, semicolon, and that's the look down I'm getting, and I can just adjust this little bits at a time to get the performance I want out of that. Right? Honestly, I think the antennae are doing a little too much. I'll calm those down just a little bit. So we got this motion happening, and then the next keyframe goes from here to here, right? And so this is where, if I'm watching it, like I understand what happened in between these two in the same way that I understand what happens on one panel of a comic book to the next panel of a comic book, right? The character's looking down, and the next frame, they're looking up. What I don't understand is what's happening right here in the middle. How does my character go from looking down to looking up? And so this is where I have that opportunity to create that answer, right? Now, just to let you know, I can go in here and set this to a motion keyframe and get like what harmony thinks might happen in that motion, but it's going to give me a very boring solution. Right? It's basically just going to blend from A to B. And I want something here where the character's kind of squashed down a little bit more. I want to kind of angle the character's head around, right, if I can, like kind of dip it through this look, right? And so I can borrow this if I wanted to. I could hit F6, and then I could still go back to my stop motion keyframe, and I have a keyframe there, right? And even if that's not where I wanted it, even if I wanted to grab that and move it, say, back one, I can do stuff like that and give me a starting point, right? So let's try that. I'm going to push my character down into a little bit of a squashed pose, right? And then I want to try to make it look like my character's eye is sort of like he's kind of rolling his head forward. And I'm going to do that by moving the entire eye down and, moving this entire eye down. And I'm also going to move the antenna down. So if I do this, and sort of maybe drag the antenna a little bit, what it looks like is the character rolled their head forward, and now I'm seeing the top of the head just a little bit more. So I want to drag these antennae as the character's head is going around, and to make it look more like the eye is dipping, I want to continue pushing that eye down just a little bit, but I want it to maybe get just a touch bigger, just a little bit, and then I'm going to change these eyelids to make those feel like we're seeing the eye from the top a little bit more. So I'm kind of just sort of faking this idea a little bit of the eye being lower, but let me deselect everything and click this pose just so you can see that. So that does look a little bit though like the character is leaning their head forward, especially compared to the previous frame and the next frame. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong keyframes. Start here, there. So you see how that kind of looks like the character is dipping and rolling their head forward and then up, right? Now, I hold this up pose for quite a while before this anticipation down. So I think I'm actually going to angle that out a little bit. I'm going to kind of take this pose here. Actually, let's make sure I keyed everything on this one first, F6. And then this one, make sure everything's keyed on that. And I'm going to copy it, Control C, and then just go out here, Control V, paste it in there. And I'm just going to try to make this arc even a little deeper to where when the character comes up here, this is like where they come back to. So I'm going to have them kind of overshoot here a little bit, right? So for this part, oh, got too much selected there. There we go. There we go. Past. And I'm going to take the eye, move it just a little bit past here. Oop, move that a little bit past. And I'm going to play around with these antennae to do the same thing, just to kind of fake a little bit of a some depth, right? Push this one forward, push this one back. I'm going to go ahead and rotate them both to be overshooting a little bit. And so now if we watch this, let me cut back through here. I'm holding in this position, right? And looking a little closer, and then this, and then he ends here. So we get this swoop around, right? And then I think to make this a little clearer, I'm going to go ahead and have these sort of finish doing this a little bit more. I'll show you why. If we watch those antennae now, they kind of drag through here, overshoot here, come back here. And I may, just a little bit, I may stretch the character's head up, and this up a little bit. And on this one here, just to get a little bit more of that squash in the neck, I'm going to push this down just a little bit, push this up just a little bit. I'm just kind of getting that, like, squashing the neck a little bit. And so now, without those visible, let's watch it. There we go. So now if I were to go in here and set all of these to motion keys, I get a little bit of a different result. So I still think this head turn is feeling a little slow to me. In fact, I think I'm probably going to set another keyframe here, F6, and pull that keyframe into here and sort of tighten up how much time this head turn takes. So think of it, this range right here is where my character's head turns. By making those closer together, that's going to happen faster now. So yeah, there we go. So that's feeling a little better now. There we go. And then we get this jump through here. So I think in the next video we'll jump into this jump, and we'll see what we can do to make this feel a little bit more interesting.